She blocked an ambulance and told paramedics to find another route. What happened next in Judge Caprio's courtroom shocked the entire nation. It was a quiet Tuesday morning in Providence Municipal Court, a day that should have been ordinary until everything changed. The doors opened, and Veronica Sterling stepped in, the billionaire's wife, perfectly polished, diamond necklace glinting, Hermes handbag in hand. Every eye in the room turned. Some whispered her name. Others held their breath. There was something in the air that told everyone this was not a normal case. And it wasn't. Just hours ago, she had blocked an ambulance. Not by accident, not by mistake, but by sheer arrogance. A man, Michael Torres, was fighting for his life. Heart attack, ambulance flashing lights, paramedics waving frantically. And she didn't move. She rolled down her tinted window and told them to find another route. For minutes. That was all it took. For minutes that changed a life forever. For minutes that would ignite a courtroom storm and make headlines worldwide. Inside, Judge Frank Caprio looked at her calmly. A man known for fairness, compassion, and integrity. But even he felt the weight of what had happened. That simple traffic violation had become a test of morality, of accountability, of power versus principle. Veronica didn't stand. She didn't seem concerned. She smiled, a small, chilling smile. She believed wealth could shield her from consequence. That luxury and influence could replace conscience. Case number 2179, the clerk announced. State of Rhode Island versus Veronica Sterling. The courtroom went silent. Every person leaned forward. Every camera clicked. This wasn't just a traffic case anymore. It was human life versus privilege. Judge Caprio cleared his throat. Mrs. Sterling, he said evenly, you are charged with failure to yield to an emergency vehicle. How do you plead? She didn't blink. Your Honor, she said smoothly, there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't notice the ambulance. I was handling important business. The courtroom murmured, important business? A man's life hung in the balance, and she called it business. Judge Caprio's eyes narrowed slightly. A man's heartbeat, Mrs. Sterling. Did that not matter? Her smirk widened. I run a foundation. I employ thousands. Surely you understand the bigger picture. But the bigger picture had one glaring truth she refused to see. She had put herself above humanity. Then she said the words that would ignite outrage across the globe. Words she thought clever, but would soon haunt her. Some people, she said casually, just matter more than others. The courtroom froze. Every soul felt it. The arrogance, the entitlement, the moral blindness. And in that silence, Judge Caprio's calm voice cut through like lightning. Mrs. Sterling, he said, you are about to learn the law applies to all, not just those who believe they are above it. The paramedics, the clerk, even the janitor outside the courtroom could sense it. Something monumental was about to unfold. Because this case was no longer about traffic. It was about justice. It was about morality. It was about whether money could ever buy conscience or if the law still had power over privilege. And what happened next would shock the world. What happened next in this courtroom would go viral and change a life forever. The courtroom was electric, a quiet tension that could be felt in every corner. Every eye was on Veronica Sterling, the woman who believed wealth could rewrite the rules. Every ear hung on Judge Caprio, the man who had seen every kind of human arrogance, but none like this. Veronica's confidence was palpable. Legs crossed, shoulders back, a diamond bracelet catching the light. She looked untouchable. But today, untouchable would meet unyielding. Judge Caprio cleared his throat. Mrs. Sterling, he said, calm yet firm. You claim your responsibilities outweigh the law. You claim your wealth makes your decisions above accountability. Is that true? Veronica's voice was smooth, practiced. Your Honor, I manage a foundation, oversee thousands of employees, and make decisions that affect lives every day. Surely you understand that some responsibilities require prioritization. The judge leaned forward, his eyes piercing. And yet, he said, you blocked an ambulance responding to a man's heart attack. His life was at stake. You claim your responsibilities are greater than his heartbeats. The courtroom murmured. Whispers spread like wildfire. Even the stenographer paused mid-sentence. The gallery leaned forward. Veronica smirked. I've contributed millions to hospitals. My taxes support emergency services. Surely that should count for something. Judge Caprio's voice was quiet, measured, and devastating in its precision. Contributions cannot replace conscience, Mrs. Sterling. No amount of money justifies risking a life. And then, the moment that would shift the courtroom entirely, the man herself had endangered stepped forward. Michael Torres, 62, frail yet determined, approached slowly, came tapping on the marble. The man whose life had been nearly stolen now stood as a silent judge in his own right. Mrs. Sterling, Michael said, voice firm but steady, you blocked my ambulance. You delayed my chance to live. You acted as though my life didn't matter. Do you realize that? Veronica's eyes widened slightly. This was unexpected. She had rehearsed for judges, lawyers, and reporters, but not for the raw humanity standing before her. I didn't know, she whispered. Her first falter. You didn't want to know? Michael countered. Because people like me don't exist in your world until you need a house built, a charity photo op, or a headline. That's the difference between us. The courtroom was silent. The air hung thick with tension. Reporters held their cameras steady, knowing this was a story that would define their careers. The audience online, when clips would later go viral, would feel the exact weight of this moment. Human life confronting wealth and entitlement. Judge Caprio watched both parties carefully. Mrs. Sterling, he said softly, your arrogance is clear. Your belief that your life matters more than others is apparent. But the law does not bend for pride, money, or influence. Today, all that changes. Veronica swallowed. She had dominated boardrooms, controlled reputations, and silenced scandals with a phone call. Yet here, she was silent. The moral compass she had ignored for so long now pointed straight at her, and there was nowhere to run. Michael Torres's presence was a mirror she could no longer avoid. The man who had lived through her decision, the man whose heart bore the scar of her arrogance, was the embodiment of consequences. And then Judge Caprio dropped another layer. Mrs. Sterling, while this began as a traffic violation, I have reviewed your charitable foundation and Sterling Industries. There are inconsistencies, misreported donations, tax anomalies, and patterns of privilege that place your convenience above others' safety. A ripple ran through the gallery. Whispers of no way, and is that true, filled the room. Veronica's attorney shot the judge a warning look, but Judge Caprio remained unshaken. Do you see, Mrs. Sterling? He continued, calm but unforgiving. Every decision you make, every belief that wealth grants immunity, has consequences. Today, you face those consequences in full. Veronica's composure cracked slightly. She had never encountered a courtroom where truth held such weight. Her wealth, her status, her influence, none of it could shield her now. Michael Torres took a step closer, voice steady. I don't hate you. I just need you to understand that your choices affect real people, real lives. No money, no influence, no foundation can replace that. The silence after his words was deafening. Even the camera crews paused. Every viewer who would later watch this online would feel the same tingle. The moment the arrogant met accountability, the moment human life demanded recognition. Judge Caprio's eyes softened slightly, though his voice remained firm. Accountability is not revenge, Mrs. Sterling. It is justice. And justice does not discriminate between rich or poor, powerful or humble. It is impartial. Today, the scales are balancing. Veronica's hands trembled slightly. She had been untouchable. She had believed she could manipulate perception, charm her way through any courtroom, escape consequence. But all that had changed in the span of a few intense minutes. What will happen next to the billionaire wife? Will justice truly hold? How will her empire react? Judge Caprio didn't need to answer. The tension spoke for itself. The audience leaned forward, eyes glued. The story was no longer about a traffic violation. It was about morality, consequences, and the collision of privilege with human life. And just as Veronica seemed to gather herself, The judge added quietly, but with deadly weight. Mrs. Sterling, what is about to unfold will not just determine your punishment. It will redefine your understanding of responsibility, empathy, and life itself. And you will have no one to shield you but your own conscience. The courtroom held its breath. Even Veronica realized the walls of her empire might not be enough to protect her. For the first time, she felt small, vulnerable, human. Her world of privilege is about to crumble, and the world is watching. The next morning, the courtroom wasn't just full, it was overflowing. News vans lined the street outside. Cameras flashed from every corner. The world had heard about the billionaire's wife who blocked an ambulance, and now they wanted to see what justice would do next. When Veronica Sterling walked in, she looked calm, maybe too calm. A soft smile, a designer coat, that same untouchable air. But behind her eyes, something flickered. Fear, doubt. Maybe for the first time, she knew this wasn't a room she could buy. Judge Frank Caprio sat at the bench, papers neatly stacked before him. His voice, calm but heavy, filled the courtroom. Mrs. Sterling, he said, yesterday we heard your defense. Today we discuss your truth. The audience leaned forward. Every second was being streamed, clipped, and shared across the internet. Hashtags were already trending. Hashtag Justice for Michael. Hashtag Judge Caprio. Hashtag Billionaire Wife. Veronica's lawyer stood. Your Honor, with respect, this case has been exaggerated. My client has already expressed regret. Let's finalize the fine and conclude. Judge Caprio didn't even look at him. Sit down, counselor, he said firmly. You and your client may have underestimated the seriousness of this matter. What began as a minor traffic violation has now led us somewhere much deeper. The room went silent. He opened a thick file. In the past 48 hours, my office has reviewed several records related to the Sterling Foundation, Mrs. Sterling's charitable organization. He flipped a page, and what we found was disturbing. Veronica's confidence faltered. Judge Caprio continued, his tone precise. Millions in claimed donations to hospitals, missing. Large contributions listed under charities that don't exist. And the most troubling part? The emergency services you claim to support never received a single cent. The gallery gasped. A reporter's pen slipped from her hand. The tension was suffocating. Veronica's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, this is beyond the scope of a traffic hearing. Caprio's voice cut through like steel. When arrogance walks into my courtroom and hides behind charity, it becomes the scope. 25 seconds in, the audience is locked. The suspense climbs. Veronica tried to speak, her voice trembling. I wasn't aware of these discrepancies. My accountants handle the paperwork. Judge Caprio interrupted gently. Mrs. Sterling, when you stood here yesterday, you claimed your time was too valuable to stop for an ambulance. You said, and I quote, some people just matter more than others. He paused, looking straight into her eyes. Tell me, do you still believe that? The air was heavy. Reporters froze. Even the sound of the ceiling fan seemed to stop. Veronica looked down. Her voice was a whisper. No, Your Honor. But Judge Caprio didn't relent. Because right now, you matter less than the truth. The crowd stirred. Every viewer online leaned closer to their screen. This was more than justice. This was reckoning. Then, from the back of the room, a voice spoke up, the same voice that had shaken her confidence before. Michael Torres stood again, cane in hand. His face was calm, his tone steady. Your Honor, he said, may I speak? Caprio nodded. Go ahead, Mr. Torres. Michael turned to Veronica. You said your time was important. You said you couldn't stop for a siren. Well, that day my time almost ended. I lost 4 minutes of oxygen to my heart. For minutes that I'll never get back. The room was silent. Veronica blinked hard. Michael continued softly. You talk about responsibility. Let me tell you about responsibility. It's getting up every morning before sunrise, working until your body aches, and still stopping when you see someone in need. It's not money that makes a person important. It's compassion. Tears filled the eyes of people in the gallery. Even Judge Caprio looked moved. But before Veronica could respond, the judge dropped the final blow. Mrs. Sterling, he said, You've been using your foundation as a shield for fraud. You claimed generosity while practicing greed. You blocked an ambulance and nearly took a man's life. You've insulted the people who serve this city. And now, you will face the full weight of accountability. He picked up his gavel, but didn't strike. Instead, he stepped down from the bench and walked toward her, slow, deliberate, and unshaken. In my 38 years as a judge, he said, I've seen people make mistakes. I've seen remorse. I've seen denial. But I've rarely seen such cold disregard for human life. Today, I won't just deliver punishment. I'll deliver perspective. The audience held their breath. Mrs. Sterling, you will pay a fine of $10,000. Your license will be suspended for 6 months. You will perform 200 hours of community service with the emergency medical services you disrespected, and all records of your foundation will be submitted to federal authorities. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Veronica's face drained of color. Her empire, the one built on status and control, was collapsing right in front of her. But Judge Caprio wasn't done. His tone softened, but his words cut deeper. Justice isn't about humiliation. It's about awakening. I hope one day you understand that no amount of wealth can replace empathy, and that a heartbeat, no matter whose it is, will always matter more than a bank account. The gavel struck once. The sound was final, heavy, unforgettable. But the real story began after that sound. Because as Veronica Sterling walked out of that courtroom, cameras flashing, reporters shouting, her phone buzzed. It was her husband, Marcus Sterling. His voice trembled on the other end. Veronica, the accounts are frozen. The judge forwarded everything to the federal office. We're finished. She stopped. The world around her blurred. The reporters' voices faded. For the first time in her life, Veronica Sterling, the woman who thought she could buy everything, realized there was one thing money could never purchase: forgiveness. But what happened next shocked even the judge himself, and would change Veronica's life forever. The gavel struck one final time. The courtroom fell silent. The arrogant billionaire's wife, the woman who once believed her wealth could rewrite morality, sat frozen. Veronica Sterling's empire had crumbled in a single hour. Judge Frank Caprio's voice echoed softly through the chamber. Justice is not about power, Mrs. Sterling. It's about perspective. And today, you've been given both. Veronica didn't speak. Her eyes glistened. For the first time, she didn't have an argument or an audience. Only truth staring back at her. Her fine was set. Her license suspended. Her foundation under federal review. But her real punishment was just beginning, because Judge Caprio had added one final line to her sentence, one that would change her forever. You will complete 200 hours of community service, he said, working alongside the very emergency services you once disrespected. That meant riding in the same ambulances she once ignored, hearing the same sirens she once dismissed as noise, and seeing, up close, the lives behind every flashing light. As Veronica walked out of the courtroom, reporters swarmed her, shouting questions. Cameras flashed like lightning. Mrs. Sterling, any comment on the verdict? Do you regret blocking the ambulance? Will Sterling Industries survive this scandal? But she said nothing. For once, silence felt heavier than any statement. Her husband, Marcus Sterling, was waiting by the black car outside, phone pressed to his ear, panic in his voice. Veronica, they've frozen the accounts. The audits are expanding. The company's stock is crashing. She interrupted quietly. Marcus, stop. I just need a moment. For the first time, the sound of sirens passing by didn't irritate her. It humbled her. It reminded her of that day, the day she believed she was more important than a man's heartbeat. But what she experienced next was something even she couldn't have imagined. 2 weeks later, Veronica Sterling sat in the passenger seat of an ambulance, not as a patient, not as someone in control, but as a silent observer. She wore a plain blue paramedic vest. No jewelry, no diamonds, just humility. The siren wailed. The streets blurred past. And for the first time, she felt what urgency really meant. Every second mattered. Every delay could decide a life. At the back of the ambulance, a young EMT worked tirelessly on an elderly man struggling to breathe. Veronica watched his hands shake, not from fear, but from determination. His uniform was soaked in sweat, yet his focus never wavered. When they finally reached the hospital, the man survived. And as Veronica stepped out of the ambulance, something inside her broke and healed at the same time. She whispered to the paramedic beside her, "You do this every day?" He smiled faintly. "Every day, because every life counts." That line hit her harder than any verdict. Every life counts. It was the same truth Judge Caprio had tried to teach her. The same truth Michael Torres had risked his life to remind her of. And now, she finally understood it. Over the next several months, Veronica fulfilled her sentence quietly. She rode in dozens of ambulances. She visited hospitals where her donations had never arrived. And she met families who had lost loved ones waiting for help that never came. The transformation wasn't dramatic. It was slow, honest, and real. Her arrogance melted away, replaced by something unfamiliar: gratitude. The world still watched. News outlets updated headlines. Green Circle, billionaire's wife humbled by Judge Caprio's verdict. Green Circle, Veronica Sterling completes community service, finds redemption. Green Circle, justice that changed a life. Millions followed her story, not because they enjoyed her downfall, but because they witnessed something rare in a world driven by ego, a powerful person rediscovering her humanity. Months later, Veronica returned to the same courtroom, this time not as a defendant. She had requested to speak at a community justice event hosted by Judge Caprio himself. The room was full, just like before, but the atmosphere was different. There were no reporters this time, only ordinary citizens, volunteers, and paramedics. She stood at the podium, voice soft but steady. "Your Honor," she began, "I came here months ago believing my life mattered more than others. I left here learning that life, any life, is sacred. I once thought generosity was measured in money, but I've learned it's measured in compassion. I can't undo what I did, but I can spend the rest of my life making it right." The room was silent. Even Judge Caprio, who had seen every kind of human transformation, was visibly moved. From the back, Michael Torres stood. The man whose life she had nearly taken now smiled faintly. "You did good, Mrs. Sterling," he said quietly. "You did good." Tears welled in Veronica's eyes. "No," she replied, "you did. You survived, and you saved me." The audience applauded, not for her wealth, not for her power, but for her humility. Judge Caprio rose, voice calm and warm. "Justice," he said, "is not about destroying those who err. It's about giving them a chance to rebuild, with truth as their foundation." He looked at Veronica. "Today, you've rebuilt yours." The camera slowly zooms in on her face, no longer the cold, untouchable billionaire's wife, but a woman changed by accountability, awakened by empathy. Outside, another ambulance siren echoed through the city. This time, Veronica didn't flinch. She bowed her head slightly and whispered under her breath, "Go save them," because now she understood. Money fades, power crumbles, but compassion endures. That's what Judge Caprio had been trying to teach her all along. And it's what millions of viewers would carry with them after watching her story. In a world where arrogance often overshadows empathy, one courtroom reminded us of the truth. No one stands above justice. No heart beats less than another. And sometimes, the greatest verdict isn't the punishment. It's the change that follows. Justice isn't about power. It's about humanity.